Hello, everyone, and welcome to Women Have Needs Too. Women have needs too. Right now, I need to learn how to deal with the pain of infidelity. Today, we are talking with the author, Dr. Dr. Katrina Esau, who wrote The Pain of Infidelity Births Purpose. Dr. Esau, are you there? Hello there. Thank you for joining us today.
Hi, how are you?
Wonderful. How are you doing today?
I'm wonderful. It's a privilege and an honor to be here with you today.
Oh, thank you so much for coming on. I know that there are going to be many women who are going to enjoy this show and the information that you have to share with them. So, the pain of infidelity, it is painful. I've been through it, and we all can endure and move past it, right? Is that your message today?
It is. It is. There is joy and peace on the other side. It doesn't seem like it when you're in paddling feverishly, but there is hope.
No, absolutely. So tell me about your story and how you came to write the book.
So back actually September of 2003, my husband and I went through infidelity and went through a separation. I was actually at a women's conference and came back to find out that my husband had stayed with another woman over the weekend, which of course was horrifying. I did not think twice. You know, for me, cheating was a deal breaker. So immediately I was like, he had to go. You know, I packed up his things, didn't give him a choice. He had to leave. I didn't know what to do, how I was going to recover or anything at the time. I was hurt. Hence the name of the book, The Pain of Infidelity, Birth's Purpose. It was a very traumatic experience for me. Probably one of the worst that I have encountered to date. You know, I've lost some very close loved ones, but cheating and the pain of it is a very close second, that grieving process, if not right there in line with it. And so my husband and I, we went through it, we separated, and I didn't know at the time that our marriage would be restored. For me, again, I wanted a divorce. I did not want to go through it. Again, it was a deal breaker, but in the process, we actually were separated for about 3 years. Then he came home and then actually went off to prison. So then we were separated for another almost 3 years. So technically, we were apart for almost 6 years, even though, you know, that time while he was in prison, we were working on restoring the marriage. But if you know anything, you know, it's one thing to say something when you're away, when you need support, when you want to make sure, you know, that you have somebody sending you some sort of finances when you can't do for yourself. So when he came home, that was when the real test began because I've heard what you've said these last 3 years, but now the rubber meets the road and it's time for you to really walk it out. And so, you know, we went through our process. It was a long, daunting process. It was very painful because you, as a woman, you know, and for me, it was hard because I was a believer and I didn't understand how something so traumatic could happen to me, you know. And so, what I quickly learned though is that. As we've heard often, when you know when you're pointing one finger, there's always four pointing back at you. So we have to deal with our own faults, and so that was a process for me to really begin to do some reflection and to learn about my contributions to what had happened. One thing I don't do is I will not take responsibility for my husband cheating, but I do know that I had something to contribute to the issues that were going on in our marriage. And
Right.
so forgiveness was the hardest thing, you know, to forgive him, number one, for what he did, to forgive myself for the things that I had done, and then also to forgive God, who I felt like had allowed this to happen to me, and I didn't quite understand why. So walking through that came the five pillars. What I teach other women that I had to walk through was number one is forgiveness, to having a vertical relationship, being in vertical alignment, because it was through, you know, prayer and having that relationship with that helped me to get through the painful moments, to help me to overcome the triggers. That's a very key part of knowing, the triggers and the things that keep you from forgiving, that keep you from walking in wholeness, knowing those things so that you can overcome them. And then also self care. I had to learn how to take care of myself. As women, we naturally pour out into others, but we often put ourselves at the very bottom of that list. So I had to learn how to put Katrina first, put the mask on me, as they say when you're on the airplane, and then put the mask on others. And so I had to learn how to do that. I had to learn who I was, which is, walking in the newness of life. I had to look at who I considered myself to be versus what God had called me to be. And then I had to work on rebuilding trust, which is, um, it's hard. It's hard. It's challenging to do that. And that's probably one of the questions I get asked the most is, how did you do that? How did you trust again? And the very first piece of that is, number one, is you have to decide. It all starts with a decision. The same with forgiveness. It's not easy to forgive someone that has hurt you in that way, but you have to make a choice and decide that this is what I'm going to do. And then come hell or high water, you have to do that. And you have to have different, accountability in place. You have to have a strategy. You have to have a plan. And that's one of the things, that's what I teach other women that I come in contact with. That's what I help other wives with, is teaching them different strategies to overcome and to walk into that fullness. And, my husband and I, we walk through it, through our process. Is it going to happen overnight? Absolutely not. It took some time. It took years, actually, before I got to the place to where there wasn't any negative emotion attached to the memories of what had happened to me. Um, I could literally, like with triggers and stuff, I remember I could be going down a certain intersection in Tampa here, which is where I was when I learned that my husband had stayed with another woman, and I could pass that intersection and it would literally set me back. Like I would go into this deep, dark depression. And so that happened often. And so I had to realize, number one, that there was a trigger. And then I had to create strategies to overcome it, because I'm not going to drive around all of Tampa just to avoid this intersection. And so I had to overcome that and overcome the pain that was associated with it. So that's some of the stuff that I help wives to do, is to know what the triggers are, whether it's an intersection, whether it's someone putting up a Christmas tree, whether it's a perfume, a cologne, a scent, you name it, whatever it is, we have to overcome that. And I'm grateful today that, we walk through our process, we walk through the healing. Even if you have to get counseling, you have to do what works for you. My emotions were all over the place when I walked through this journey. And I got to the point where I was tired of my emotions leading and guiding and dictating, how I was going to live life. So I had to seek professional counsel, to get that under control. And so I like to help wives understand, number one, that they're not alone, that they're not by themselves, and that it does require strategic planning, to come out on the other side of this. And so that you can get to the place to where you can take off that shame, that guilt, that embarrassment, all of those things that come along with infidelity and being cheated on, because you're shameful, you're hurt. Nobody wants to walk around with a sign saying, "Hey, my husband cheated on me."
Yeah.
Who would want to do that? And so, you have that whole embarrassing. So you always put on the mask of everything is fine, everything is great, when in all honesty, it's really not. And so here you are putting on a front in front of other people, but then you're going home and, crying yourself to sleep or beating yourself up with your words and tearing yourself down because you're hurting and you don't understand how you got here or how to get out. And so I like to equip women to help them with that, because I did it, so I know I'm not telling you something I read somewhere. I'm telling you something that I actually walked through. So I like to share the nuggets and the information that I have that has worked for me, so that you can also walk in that place of wholeness, so that you could also come out on the other side of this. It's been 17 years now, and it's a blessing to be in a place to where I can share my story and do so very openly, that I might be able to help someone.
That's great. How do you get from anger to forgiveness? Because I know a lot of times there's that anger, and for most marriages, it leads to divorce. And sometimes they forgive later. but how do you get from the anger to the forgiveness to happily ever after?
I think part of it is recognizing that healing is a process. It really is akin to trauma. When you do studies on it, it's akin to trauma. And you have to recognize that you're going to go from a spectrum. You're going to go from anger to, to bitterness, to resentment. You go to these different things. You go to denial, where you don't want to believe that it happened to you. And so I think number one, just being aware that going through infidelity and cheating, it's a process. And so knowing that, and then also the next thing to that is that's where I say come up with the strategy to overcome the trigger. So when you get to anger, something has triggered you. You saw something, you remembered something, you heard something, something has caused you to go back to that place of anger. And so once you identify that, then you can overcome it. And so what I did is, number one, I identified what my triggers were, what caused me to get angry, what caused me to get silent, what caused me to go into that depressed state, what caused me to withdraw. And then I started making affirmations. And I not only just made affirmations, but I made affirmations that were scripturally based. And I began to say those daily. And it's not oh, well, I said it one time or I did it 10 times. You can't put a time on it. You can't put a how many or how long you've done it. You have to do it until it doesn't hurt anymore.
Yeah, it's going
And
to be
so, like,
different. The timing's going to be different for everybody.
absolutely. Absolutely. And that's like for me, I was sitting at one of my girlfriend's house. We were at the table having a conversation and it just hit me like, oh my God, it doesn't hurt anymore when I talk about it. And I can't even tell you how long that had been, but what I can tell you is it had been at least 5 years. So I can't, like you said, we're all different. We're all going to process different. And I think part of the timing is how quickly you identify and deal with it. Sometimes we suppress it. It's like, okay, I don't want to deal with it. It's like that whole elephant in the room thing. I don't care how much you pack it down. I don't care how much you beautify it, put lipstick on it. It's not going to go away. It's going to blow up usually in at the most inopportune time.
Yeah.
And what I found when I first started was literally we could be having a conversation. It could be about the sky is blue, and I would remember something, and I would give a rundown of, well, you did this to me, and you said this, and the day, the time, the hour, the minute, you can give the whole run back, but it was because I hadn't dealt with it. And
Right.
so the way that you're going to progress is you really have to identify, you have to come up with different strategies, whether that be an affirmation, whether it be reading a scripture, whether it be just, another thing that I like to teach women is we can't outthink a thought. So a thought will come and it's usually, if it's a negative thought and you dwell on it. And the next thing you know, you have a whole series. You have literally put together a movie in your mind, and so open up your mouth and interrupt that thought. And so when the negative thoughts come, speak positive. Like I would declare, I'm beautiful. I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. My husband loves me. He treats me as he's supposed to. And so just interrupting that whole negative pattern and just knowing that you may have a good day, you may have a good moment. It might change. But when you get those things under control and when you begin to control your emotions, it helps you to move forward to where you can get to a place of true forgiveness. One of the things I like to talk about with forgiveness is sometimes we've been taught, I'll forgive you, but I'll never forget. What's the benefit of that? And so
Right.
if you haven't forgotten it and you choose to hold on to it, you really haven't forgiven. And so you want to get to a place to where you can truly forgive and not even have the memory of it. And even what I would say is not have a negative emotion attached to the memory because the memories may come, but how are you responding to them? And so that like I said, it's a process, but it truly can be done. It really can.
Right, because part of the healing process is replacing those negatives with positives, and I'm sure that you got to that comfortable feeling where this was never going to happen again. There are many cases out there where somebody has done this repeatedly, and there becomes this distrust, and a wife is like, "Well, you've done it 3 times. What makes you think? What makes you think that I'm going to believe you're never going to do it again?"
Right, right. And that's that's one of the challenges where I think, every situation is different and you have to have the conversation because that's one of the things, like, even for me, I was asked once before, like, when you came back, did you have any, like, were there any deal breakers or anything? And I didn't. Because when I made the decision to come back and to really fight for my marriage, there wasn't a plan B. There wasn't a, what if this happened? So
Right.
I didn't have any of that. And the only reason I didn't is because for me, what the decisioning factor was is I was having a conversation with God one day and I was really just pleading my case because I wanted out. I didn't want to deal with this. I'm hurt. I want somebody that's going to love me for me, that's going to treat me the way they're supposed to treat me. And so I'm having this conversation and I'm like, why do I have to deal with this? You said that's the only reason in the word that you say that you give us the bill of divorce. And the response was, you're right. You can get a divorce, but if you do, your daughter's going to have to fight the same thing. Because the thing of it is divorce in my family was a generational curse. My parents divorced, my grandparents divorced, my great great parents divorced. So it was generational. And
Mm,
so at that time, I'm like, I don't want my daughter to have to fight something because I couldn't fight it or was too weak to fight it or whatever. I'm like, she's going to have her own challenges in life. And truth be told, she might still have to deal with divorce. It won't be because I didn't fight. And so when I made that decision, I forgave when you're forgiving, you have to forgive knowing that this person has the ability to hurt you again.
right.
Literally, when you forgive them, they can hurt you. And so I made the decision to forgive knowing that. And not to say that you're going to become a doormat to people and allow people to walk all over you. That's why I talk about the importance of having a relationship with God, is because number one, you need to get direction on, are you supposed to be in this relationship? Because sometimes we're in relationships that we never should have been in. And
Right.
so that's why I don't like to tell women whether they should stay or they should leave, because I don't know that. But you have to get very clear on it. And when you're clear on what you're doing and why you're doing it, you got to stand true to that and hold on to it, regardless come what may. And again, I'm not telling anybody to be a doormat and just allow people to treat you any kind of way. Because truth be told, like, if somebody asked me today, well, if it happened again, would you stay or would you leave? I don't know. The flesh part of me would say absolutely not, but then the part of me that wants to hold on to my belief and hold on to my faith, I don't know. I pray that I never have to walk through that again because it is horrible. I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy.
Right.
But we definitely have to make a decision, and we have to know that when we forgive somebody, that's why another thing I teach women is forgiveness is not conditional. You can't say, I'm going to forgive you if you do this or if you do that. And we have to be careful with giving ultimatums because we treat people how we teach people how to treat us. And so if I tell you, well, if you do this, I'm going to do this, but I never follow through, now I've built up a pattern. And, now well, oh, she'll just say it for a week or two and then she'll go back to whatever. So do what you're going to say, say what you mean and mean what you say.
I love that because that is so true, and that's the bottom line. And I can't wait to read your book. But can you give us a little snippet of the book, or have you just done that? Uh, give them a little nugget of what they're going to find and help them get through that process.
Absolutely. So in my book, number one, I start off with telling my own story. I was hurt, and so I felt like, well, he cheated on me, so I'll cheat on him. That don't work. Don't do
No,
that. Two wrongs don't
no.
make a right. So I start out, sharing my story because I want to be real. I don't want to be the one pointing the finger and, acting like I'm a saint. I thought I was, but I found out I wasn't.
Yeah,
So,
we never do anything wrong, right? It's not my fault.
right, you did it. Perfect. But I share my story in chapter one. And then I also, I share in chapter two, I share what that was for me, coming home to find out that my husband had cheated. I also share about my relationship with God, how I built that. I talk about walking in the newness of life with, knowing who you are, who God says you are compared to how you define yourself. I talk about the triggers, I talk about the process. I also talk about in the book, how we rebuilt trust. So I have it broken out into, that the first part is the breaking. That was the hardest part, finding out the news, and walking through that. And then the second portion of the story is just, walking in that healing and that restoration and sharing how our marriage was restored. And then the very last chapter of the book, I actually share from the heart of my husband. And it was important for me to put that in because even though it's my story and I'm sharing it, my perception and what I walked through and the pain that it was for me, I knew that I would be sharing my story with the world. And what I did not want to bring is harm or any type of hurt to my husband. So it was important for him to have a voice in my book. And I gave him the opportunity to do that, to share his heart. Which was great. I also, I don't share my daughters in here, but it was important for me for both of them to be okay with it.
Yeah.
Because again, this is, you're letting people in to
Yes,
your
and I think
personal
that
life.
was a great thing. I was actually going to ask, some of your husband's perspective. So that's very good that that you included that. Well, I think that it's a great message that infidelity does not have to end in divorce. You can repair it. Everything can be repaired, right? But it takes both of you wanting it and faith, and that relationship with God, I think, helps a great deal. A great deal. I really appreciate you being on here today, and thank you for sharing your story. And how can people get a hold of your book?
They can get my book on my website, which is www.drkatrinaesau.com. It's also available on my Facebook page, which is KE3 Worldwide Enterprises, as well as Amazon and Kindle.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Katrina, for being with us today. And women have needs too. Right now, I need to push through that infidelity and have faith in God, and go through the process of healing. And thank you so much for being here. And we look forward to seeing you again soon.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, everybody, have a great day.